fabled heat, where magic meets desire. Subscribe to ignite the fantasy.
The blizzard didn't howl, it screamed. It was a primal, relentless sound that tore through the ancient timber of my isolated cabin, vibrating in the very marrow of my bones. Living this far north, nestled in the spine of the unforgiving Ironcrest Mountains, meant accepting that nature was not a gentle mother, but a butcher with a blade of ice. My nearest neighbor was a 3-day trek south, a distance that felt like a century in this whiteout hell. I tightened the sash of my thick wool robe, shivering despite the roaring hearth that fought a losing battle against the cold seeping through the walls. Suddenly, the wards I'd woven into the very perimeter of my clearing triggered. It wasn't a gentle chime. It was a violent, psychic snap, like a silver cord breaking in my mind, leaving a coppery tang of alarm on my tongue. Something heavy had breached them, something in pain. I could feel the life draining from it, a frantic, desperate pulse that stained the snow-choked air. It was blighting. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed my heavy cloak and the lantern, pushing out into the abyss. The wind hit me like a physical blow, stealing my breath, but the smell of blood was sharper than the ice. I found them barely 10 yards from the porch, two monstrous shapes against the swirling white. They were massive, impossibly so, not the gray timber wolves that roamed these peaks, but creatures torn from nightmare and legend. One was a midnight black behemoth, sprawled on his side in the deepening drifts, his breathing a ragged, wet rattle that promised death. The other, a golden russet male, stood a defiant, trembling guard over him. He snarled at the wind itself, his leg favoring a jagged wound that wept a steady, dark crimson into the pristine snow. "I can help," I shouted over the gale, holding my hands up to show they were empty. The golden one snapped his jaws, teeth clicking mere inches from my face. His eyes were painfully, shockingly human amber, desperate, and filled with a terrifying intelligence. "Let me help him, or he dies out here." The golden wolf hesitated, looking down at his fallen companion, then back at me. With a low whine that sounded too much like a sob, he stepped back. It took every ounce of my strength and the assistance of the injured golden wolf to drag the black beast onto a canvas tarp and haul him inside. The moment the door latched shut, the silence of the room felt deafening, broken only by our ragged breaths and the crackle of the fire. I stoked the flames, sweating now, and turned to my patients. They were still in fur. The black wolf was unconscious, his paws shredded. It looked like they had run miles over jagged shale. His pads were raw meat, swollen and bleeding. The golden one collapsed near the hearth, watching my every move with unblinking intensity. "I need to clean this," I murmured, more to myself than the beasts. I gathered warm water, tinctures of yarrow and comfrey, and strips of clean linen. The black wolf twitched as the warm cloth touched his flank. A low rumble started in his chest. "SHH," I soothed, reaching for his paw. "This is the worst part. The ice cut you deep." I cleaned the wounds, wincing at the severity. Infection would take him within days. I needed to wrap them. I grabbed the heavy leather pouches I used for storing dried roots, improvised boots. "Nobody told you how hard it would be to put booties on a werewolf," I muttered, the absurdity of the situation almost making me hysterical. I tried to slide the leather over the massive, limp paw. The wolf flinched in his sleep, kicking out. I grunted, pinning the leg down with my hip. "Stop it. You're going to lose the foot if you don't let me." A hand, impossibly large and calloused, suddenly clamped around my wrist. The heat was searing, a shocking branding touch that shot up my arm. I gasped, my head snapping up. The fur was gone. In a silent, dizzying wash of magic and the sickening sound of shifting bone, the wolf had receded. In his place lay a man, naked, scarred, and magnificent in a way that was both terrifying and utterly captivating. His hair was as black as the midnight pelt had been, matted with sweat and melted snow. His eyes snapped open and my breath caught. They weren't wolf yellow, but the stormy gray of a winter sky, and they fixed on me with chilling focus. He didn't look grateful, he looked lethal. "Who," he rasped, his voice like gravel grinding together, "are you?" He yanked me down. I lost my balance, falling across his broad, fever-hot chest. His other hand came up to grip my throat, not squeezing, but holding me there, a hostage to his gaze. "I'm the woman saving your life," I whispered, my heart hammering against his ribs. From the fireside, a low growl vibrated through the floorboards. I froze. The golden wolf was shifting too. The air in the cabin shifted, thickening with the scent of musk, pine, and aggression. I was pinned beneath a naked stranger while another rose from the hearth rug, shedding fur for skin. "Kael, release her." The voice was smooth, like warm honey over rough wood. I twisted my head as much as the grip on my throat allowed. The golden wolf was now a man of striking beauty, tawny skin, hair the color of autumn wheat, and eyes that held a dangerous charm. He stood unashamed of his nudity, limping slightly as he approached us. The man beneath me, Kael, didn't let go, but his thumb brushed the pulse point of my neck. He was testing my fear. She smells like ozone and herbs. She's a healer, the golden one said, crouching beside us. He placed a hand on Kael's shoulder, and we are guests who broke her wards. Kael's gray eyes searched mine for a second longer before he released me. I scrambled back, clutching my robe, my face burning. It wasn't just fear. It was the sheer, overwhelming masculinity radiating off them. They were huge, corded with muscle, and staring at me with a predatory focus that made my knees water. "I'm Elara," I managed, standing up and trying to summon the dignity of a woman in her own home. "And you're bleeding on my rug." "Rian," the golden one said with a tired smile. He gestured to the dark-haired man who was struggling to sit up. "That ray of sunshine is Kael." Kael hissed in pain as he tried to put weight on his feet. He looked down at his feet, then at the leather pouch I had been trying to wrestle onto him. He looked at me, an incredulous brow raised. "Were you trying to put a bag on my foot?" "Your pads are shredded," I said, my voice finding its strength. "You can't heal if you keep tearing them open, and since you clearly have a death wish by running through the razor pass, I have to improvise." "We need to keep moving," Kael grunted, trying to stand. His legs buckled. Rian caught him. "We aren't going anywhere, Alpha," Rian said softly. "The storm has buried us, and you can't walk." Kael growled, a sound that vibrated in the floorboards. "If they find us." "They won't find us in this weather," I interjected. "Now, sit down before you fall down." To my surprise, Kael listened. He slumped back onto the furs. The dynamic between them was potent. Kael was the force, the raw power, but Rian was the anchor. Over the next few hours, the cabin became a cage of sensory overload. I gave them blankets to cover themselves, though the wool did little to hide the breadth of their shoulders or the intensity of their stares. I tended to Rian's leg first. He watched my hands with a heavy-lidded gaze that made my skin prickle. "You have a gentle touch, Elara," Rian murmured, leaning in close. I could smell him, rain and earth. It's been a long time since anyone touched us without trying to kill us. "Keep flirting, Rian, and I'll stitch your mouth shut," Kael grunted from the floor. But his eyes were on me too, tracking my every movement. When it was Kael's turn, the tension spiked. He refused to let me touch his feet while in human form, claiming the sensation was too sensitive. "Shift then," I ordered. "It's easier to treat the paws." He glared but complied. Bones cracked and reshaped until the massive black wolf lay before me again. Now came the battle. "Give me the paw, Kael," I said. He huffed, turning his head away. "Don't make me call you a bad boy," I warned. Rian snorted a laugh from the table where he was eating stew. The wolf's head snapped toward me, eyes narrowing. Slowly, grudgingly, he extended a massive, lacerated paw. I applied the salve, a stinging poultice of calendula and raw honey. He whined, a high-pitched sound that betrayed his pain. I know, I cooed, rubbing behind his ears. The coarse fur was soft as silk at the roots. Now for the booties. It was a wrestling match. He kept trying to pull away, and I had to straddle his flank to keep him still, tying the leather laces around his ankles. It was absurd, domestic, and strangely intimate. I was covered in sweat, my hair falling out of its braid, physically grappling with a deadly predator. When I finally finished, I sat back, breathless. Kael shook his paws, the leather thumping against the floor. He looked ridiculous. He looked adorable. He looked at me, and then he leaned forward and licked the sweat from my cheek. The rasp of his tongue sent a jolt of lightning straight to my core. I froze. Rian went still across the room. Suddenly, the wind outside stopped. The silence was absolute, unnatural. Kael shifted back instantly, disregarding the pain, exploding into his human form. He was naked, crouched over me, his body a shield. "What is it?" I whispered, trembling. "Silence," Kael hissed, "the kind that comes before the kill." Then the heavy oak door of my cabin didn't just open, it imploded. Wood splinters rained down like deadly confetti. Kael took the brunt of it, his back a wall of muscle shielding me. He roared, a sound of pure, unadulterated rage, and shoved me backward toward Rian. "Get her back," Kael ordered, his voice shifting into a half-growl. Through the gaping hole where my door used to be, shadows poured in. Not men, not wolves, things made of smoke and malice, their eyes burning with a cold, violet witchlight, wraiths. "Hunters," Rian cursed, grabbing a heavy iron poker from the fireplace. Elara behind the hearth, now. No, the word left my lips before I could think. The wraiths weren't physical, iron wouldn't stop them. Rian and Kael were powerful, physical beings, but they were injured, and they were fighting magic with claws. One of the shadows lunged at Kael. He swiped at it, his hand passing through the smoke, but the cold burned him, leaving a frostbite mark across his chest. He staggered. I couldn't hide. I stepped forward, the hum in my blood turning into a roar. I wasn't just an herbalist. There was a reason I lived alone. "Ignis Sanctus Defenda Nos," I chanted, the old tongue tasting like ash and honey. I thrust my hands forward. A shockwave of golden light erupted from my palms, slamming into the wraiths. They shrieked, a sound like tearing metal, and dissolved into mist, forced back out into the snow. I slammed the door shut with a gesture, the wood knitting itself back together with a groan of straining magic. I sagged, the sudden expenditure of power draining my knees. Strong arms caught me before I hit the floor. "You're a witch," Kael breathed, his face inches from mine. He wasn't looking at me with fear, he was looking at me with hunger, awe. "Hedge witch," I corrected breathlessly, leaning into his heat. I like my privacy." Rian was there too, his hand resting on the small of my back, his touch branding me through the wool. The air in the room had changed. The danger had receded, leaving behind an adrenaline crash that felt dangerously like lust. "We are mates," Rian said, his voice ragged. It wasn't a question. We didn't scent it over the blood and the storm, but the magic, it clarified everything. Kael looked at Rian, then back at me. His gray eyes were dilated, swallowing the iris. "She saved the pack, she defended the den." "I just fixed the door," I whispered, my heart hammering a erratic rhythm. "You bound yourself to us," Kael growled low in his throat. He brought his hand to my face, cupping my jaw. His thumb traced my lower lip. "Do you feel it, Elara, that pull?" I did. It felt like a hook in my navel, tugging me toward them. It was the reason I hadn't been afraid of the wolves. It was the reason their touch felt like coming home. "I feel it," I admitted. Rian moved behind me, pressing his chest to my back, sandwiching me between them. "We are broken things, Elara, exiles hunted." "I seem to be good at fixing broken things," I murmured, my eyes locked on Kael's. Kael leaned down, his forehead resting against mine. The intimacy was suffocating in the best way. "We are two, we share everything, pain, leadership, women." "I'm not a possession," I said, though my voice lacked bite. "No," Kael agreed, his nose brushing against mine, inhaling my scent. "You are the center, the anchor." He kissed me then. It wasn't gentle, it was acclaiming. His lips were hot, demanding, tasting of wildness and desperation. I melted into him, my hands tangling in his dark hair. Rian groaned against my neck, his lips grazing the sensitive skin below my ear, his hands moving to my hips to pull me flush against him. I was drowning in them. The heat, the scent, the overwhelming solidity of two men who wanted to devour me whole. Kael pulled back, his breathing harsh. He looked at my swollen lips, his eyes darkening. "We can't, not yet the wraiths, they were just the scouts." Rian stiffened behind me. "He's right, the High Mage sent them, he knows we're here." "The High Mage?" I asked, the fog of lust clearing slightly. "Why is the High Mage hunting werewolves?" Kael looked at Rian, a silent communication passing between them. "Because," Kael said grimly, looking down at his still bandaged feet, "we stole something from him, something he wants back." "What?" Ryan's hand moved to his chest, over his heart. "Not asterisk what asterisk, who?" Before I could ask what that meant, the repaired door began to glow. Not with my golden light, but with a sickly, pulsating purple. The wood hissed as it began to rot from the outside in. "He's here," Kael snarled. The rot spread instantly, turning the oak to black sludge. The blizzard blew in again, but this time a figure stepped through the ruin. He was tall, draped in robes of velvet and silk that seemed untouched by the wind. He held a staff of twisted weirwood, the High Mage. You run well, dogs, the mage sneered, his voice amplifying magically to fill the room, but you chose a poor place to die. Kael and Rian moved in sync, stepping in front of me. Run, Elara, Rian commanded, his voice tight. No, I said, planting my feet. My fear had burned away into cold determination. This was my home, these were mine. I told you, I'm good at fixing things. I didn't wait for the mage to monologue. I reached for the jars on my shelf, explosive powders, dried nightshade, concentrated spirits, and hurled them into the fire with a gust of wind magic. Boom! The hearth exploded outward, not into the room, but channeled up the chimney and outward toward the door. A wall of green chemical fire rolled over the mage. He shouted, raising a shield, but the distraction was all we needed. Now, Kael roared. He didn't shift, he didn't need to. He grabbed the iron poker Rian had dropped and launched himself through the smoke. Rian was right behind him, moving with a fluid, lethal grace. The mage was powerful, but he was arrogant. He expected beasts. He got warriors. Kael smashed the shield with the iron, the metal sparking against the magic. Rian slid low, sweeping the mage's legs. The mage fell, his staff clattering away. Elara, the staff, Rian shouted. I lunged for the twisted wood. As soon as my fingers brushed it, I felt a surge of corrupted power. I didn't try to use it. I snapped it over my knee. The backlash was immediate. A shockwave threw us all backward. The mage screamed as his source of power shattered, his form flickering. Without his anchor, the teleportation spell that brought him here collapsed. With a final, hateful shriek, the mage was sucked back into the void, vanishing along with the rot he had brought. Silence returned to the cabin. The wind howled outside, natural and clean once more. We lay amidst the debris of my living room. Kael was the first to move. He groaned, sitting up and checking his limbs. He looked at Rian, who gave a thumbs up from the floor. Then they both looked at me. I was covered in soot, my robe torn, holding two halves of a legendary magical artifact. Kael laughed. It was a rusty, unused sound, but it was genuine. He crawled over to me, wincing as he put weight on his feet. You, he said, pulling me into his lap, ignoring the soot, are absolutely terrifying. Rian joined us, wrapping his arms around both of us from behind, resting his chin on my shoulder. I think I'm in love. The staff is broken, I said, looking at the wood. He can't track you now. Not easily, Kael said, pressing a kiss to my temple. We have time to heal. And time to explain why you stole yourselves from him, I added, raising an eyebrow. Later, Rian promised, nipping at my ear. Right now, I think we need to keep warm. The door is gone, after all. I looked at the gaping hole. It would take days to fix properly. But here, in the pile of furs and broken furniture, with the heat of two werewolves pressing into me, I wasn't cold. Kael shifted slightly, and a familiar thumping sound hit the floorboards. I looked down. He was still wearing the leather booties. One was half untied, flopping sadly. I burst out laughing. The adrenaline crashed, and I couldn't stop giggling. What? Kael demanded, feigning offense, though his eyes were warm. The booties, I gasped, pointing. You just defeated a high mage wearing homemade leather socks. Kael looked at his feet, then back at me. He grinned, a wicked, wolfish grin that promised trouble. Well, nobody told you how hard it would be to take them off, either. Rian laughed, pulling us both down into the furs. Let's figure it out, he whispered. We have all winter. The storm raged on outside, but inside, the pack was finally home.